Hello, my name is Aviva, and today I'm going to be starting my reading vlog for the last two books that I have on Mariana Zapata's backlist that I have not yet read. So if you're not familiar, Mariana Zapata is very well known for her slow burn romances, and I'm a really big fan of her work. I think she has either like 12 or 13 books out there, and I've read all but two, and I really have thoroughly enjoyed the majority of them. And a couple of months ago, I basically decided that I want to be able to officially say that I have read every single book that she's written, even though there were a couple out there that I wasn't extremely excited to read, but I decided to read them anyway, and I have been slowly doing that, and I'm now finally down to my last two, and I decided that I wanted to vlog it for you guys. So the two books I'm going to be reading in today's video is The Best Thing and then Lingus. So this is a second chance romance, and I already do not have high hopes for this because in general I'm not really a big fan of second chance romances, but this is the only one that she has written, and I don't want it to be the only one to say that like, oh yeah, I haven't read that one just because it was second chance. So I'm going to give it a shot, but honestly I don't have high hopes for it, and not only because it's second chance and I'm not generally a fan of the trope, but because I have seen a lot of people review this book and people that I trust their reviews on, and they are even fan of second chance romances, and yet they still have not said amazing things about this one. But I'm going to read it anyway so that I can say that I've read it in case anybody in the future asks me about it. So yeah, we'll be reading this one in today's video, and then also we will be reading Lingus. So this book is about this girl who ends up going to a porn convention, bumping into a porn star, and then it's going to end up being their romance somehow. And honestly, I don't really have an issue with the fact that he's a porn star. Like, I have read a book in the past where the main guy was a porn star, and I actually really did enjoy the book. But this one, I have not seen a lot of reviews on it, but the few reviews that I have seen have not been that great. So for some reason, people seem to not love this book, and therefore I do not have really high expectations for it. But I really want to read these so that I can say that I've read all of her books. So that is what we are going to be doing in today's video. So I'm going to be starting on one of these. I have not decided which one yet, but either way, when I have something to share with you, I will come back and give you guys an update. So wish me luck. I really do think that I'm going to need it.
The next day.
So I ended up starting with Lingus, and I already got 163 pages in, so a little bit less than halfway through because it's only like a 400-page book, and I'm surprisingly enjoying it a lot more than I expected to. So what has happened so far? We basically started off the story where this girl is going to a porn convention with one of her best friends. Her friends had an extra ticket and kind of like reluctantly dragged her along, and at one point she's like waiting on the sidelines for her friend to get something signed like from a porn star, and basically this random guy ends up coming up to her and just like starting up a conversation. And then throughout the rest of the event, they keep on bumping into each other, keep on hanging out, kind of flirting. He's really cute. They're having a great time together. And anyway, it's like the end of the event, and she's on her way out, and she passes by one of these booths, and who do you know is on the opposite side of the table signing a bunch of autographs? This guy that she's been hanging out with the entire time, who she thought was named Tristan King because that's the name that he had given her, but supposedly he has this alter ego where he's a porn star, and his name is Robbie Lingus. So she's really surprised by this, not really sure how to react because like she was kind of liking the guy, she was flirting with him all day, and she doesn't know how to feel about like crushing on a porn star. But happens to be one of her like really good friends is a porn star, so she's a little bit familiar with the industry and how things work. But either way, once he was done signing, he ends up like going up to her and being like, look, I don't really like do relationships because of, you know, my profession and everything like that, but I can really use a friend, and I really enjoyed hanging out with you today, so, you know, do you want to be friends? And she's like, wow, I'm getting friend zoned here. I really liked the guy, but you know what, I will take what I can get. So that is kind of where the rest of the stories go. Like, she is like in the friend zone at the moment, and they just keep on hanging out, kind of like building up their friendship. They've like gone bowling, and like there was even a take care of him sick moment where it's like he got the flu, so she went over to his house and like ended up like taking care of him for a couple of days, and they've been hanging out a lot, having great conversations, things along those lines. And that is where I'm at the moment, and I've honestly been really enjoying that aspect of the story. Like, even though like she got friend zoned, and I'm like, whatever about that, I really like the idea that they're starting out as friends, kind of getting to know each other and building on that really well, because I'm a really big fan of seeing like multiple interactions in a book. Like, I like seeing when these two characters are really getting to know each other, really having a lot of great conversations, hanging out with each other a lot, and like that is how they're building up this sort of relationship. Like, I'm just a fan of seeing that, and I think that this book is doing it pretty solidly. And this is definitely not a regular like slow burn Mariana Zapata book. Like, things are pretty fast paced, and it feels a lot more like a regular romance, and I'm actually enjoying that aspect of it. So that is kind of like my positive feelings towards the book for now, but it happens to be I do have a couple of negative things. So one of my big things that I said it wasn't going to bother me is the fact that he's a porn star, and I went into this book knowing that, so I already had like, you know, specific expectations of being like, look, I gotta be okay with this, even though I'm like a super jealous person and I really don't like the fact that like he sleeps with a bunch of people to like make money sort of thing. Like, I don't like that idea in theory, but going into this book knowing that like prepared me a little bit, and that's not technically what's bothering me. What's bothering me is that it's kind of like his other rare personality. Like, not a lot of people know about that like side of his life, and therefore because he's like friends with her, he wants to be friends with her as Tristan, so he's kind of like keeping that part of his life like on the side, and they don't really ever talk about it. And that's what's bothering me, mostly because like it's bothering her. Like, she kind of wants to know a little bit more about that side of him, and he's like keeping it very closed door, and she's kind of like, she doesn't really want to bring it up, doesn't really want to ask about it because like she feels weird. But like there's been multiple like opportunities for him to like go a little bit deeper into that topic, and he just like keeps like letting it slide, and that's kind of what's bothering me. Like, I want them to have this conversation. I want to see a little bit more about that aspect, and I don't really like how he kind of like hides that part of his life from her. Like, there's just been a few moments where I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this. So whatever, I'm kind of iffy at the moment on that whole topic of it, but like it is what it is, and I'm sure that I'm going to get a conversation like eventually. But then another thing that's a little bit weirding me out is that we have been getting a lot of secondhand embarrassment, which I'm a little bit uncomfortable about, and has honestly been making me like very cringe. Like, I keep cringing like every time something like weird comes up. Like, the first time that they met, she was in the middle of like picking a wedgie like in public, and he saw it and he came over, and like that is how he like started their conversation. And I'm just like, that is so awkward. But like, happens to be, if that happens in real life, I feel like it would be weird, but like not the weirdest thing in the world. Like, you would just brush it off, and that is what they did in this book. But like, just reading about it really like made it like 10 times weirder for some reason. And there have been a handful of moments that just get like more awkward and more awkward than that. And I won't go into detail, but like basically like there has been a ton of secondhand embarrassment, and I'm not too sure how I feel about that. But it happens to be like, I'm just gonna let it slide for now, because like I'm not gonna let that ruin the book for me just yet. And also, like, Mariana Zapata, like, she happens to do that a lot. Like, in her books, like, I've seen a lot of secondhand embarrassment in her other stories, so like I'm kind of like used to it by now. But I'm not gonna lie, like, this book has a little bit more than her average book has, like secondhand embarrassment sort of stuff. So anyway, yeah, that's a little bit weird. And then, you know, I'm waiting for this like porn conversation thing to come up, but hopefully it will come up soon. So yeah, that is how I'm feeling about it now. Overall, I'm thoroughly enjoying it, but there are a couple of things that is definitely not going to make this book a 5-star for me. So I'm going to keep on reading because it's beautiful out now, and I think it's going to rain soon, so I want to get as much reading in outside as I can before I have to go in. So yeah, I will update you when I have something else to share.
The next day.
So last night I did end up finishing this one, and unfortunately I did not love it by the time I got to the end of it, and I have a couple of reasons for that. So the last time I updated you guys, I think like she was still in the friend zone. They were just like building up their friendship, and then slowly after that they started to make each other really jealous. Like, he would start to go away for some of his like business trips, and she'd get like crazy jealous, like crying in the corner when he's gone, sort of jealous. So then in exchange, she basically started going on a bunch of dates, because supposedly everywhere she went, people just like kept hitting on her. And then he would text her like, oh, what are you doing? Like, while he was away, he's like, oh, I miss you, what's up? And she's like, oh, I'm out doing this and this. And then in exchange, he'd get extremely jealous. And then we kind of went back and forth of doing that for a little bit, until he finally decided that like, no, he likes her too much, so he's going to retire his Robbie name, basically quit his job so that he can be with her. So that was more or less like the gist of the entire story. They met, they got friend zoned, they basically like, you know, built up their friendship, they started getting jealous of each other, and therefore he quit his job so that he could be with her. Like, that was the whole thing. And I think that in the second half of the book, I just really started to get a little bit bored for some reason. Like, I don't really know why, but like all of a sudden I stopped caring. And I think it was really just like a buildup of everything that was happening, because like besides for that just like little very small thing of like them making each other jealous, like nothing much happened. But on top of that, I still never really even got that conversation that I was looking for. And that ultra pissed me off, because she wanted to know everything that I kind of wanted to know. And the thing is, it was only from her POV, so we were only seeing her side of things. And the thing is like, he kept being like, oh, I will never lie to you. Like, you have a question, you just have to ask me. And then in her head, she'd be like, well, I really want to know all of this, but I'm not sure if I really want to know the answer to it, so I'm not going to ask it. And because she never asked any of her questions, we never got any answers. And that's what bothered me. Like, I wanted to know more. And every time something about his porn situation came up, literally it just got like brushed over the table, and like we never really got any information about it. And because of that, it kind of made me keep thinking that like he was somewhat embarrassed of his like alter ego of sorts. And like we did get that vibe off of him right from the beginning, but I was really hoping that like we'd get some information about like why he chose to do the things he did, and like why, like, you know, a little bit more. I wanted a little bit more from that aspect, because if not, then what was the point of making him a porn star? Like, I I am like, I'm a super jealous person, and like I didn't love the idea of him being in general, but like I was hoping that this book would kind of make me more comfortable with it, because I have read a book in the past, I think I mentioned it before, but I have read one other book where the main guy is a porn star, and what I enjoyed about that book is that he was very proud of what he did, and they kind of made you like, understand that side of the industry a little bit more. They kind of brought like a positive light to it, and that is why by the end of that story I was kind of okay with the topics that we were talking about. But in this book, it kind of looked at the entire situation as a very negative thing. And I think that she was like a very like judgmental person. And by the end of it, that really started to piss me off, like just like left and right. She was like super judgy here and there. And I just don't really like seeing that from like my main, female characters. So like all around the board, there was just like a really large handful of things that didn't work for me in this book. And I feel like I could keep going, but it doesn't really matter, because unfortunately, I would not recommend reading this book, especially because this is the first book that Mariana Zapata has ever written. And unless you are really into reading about porn stars, I really do think that this is one of those that you could just completely skip, especially because there aren't even any overlaps with her other books. And I know a lot of people really want to read her entire backlog, including myself. Like this is one reason why I wanted to read her whole backlog, was because I wanted to see all the like tiny little overlaps and like, whatever cameos and things like that she does in her books. And this one had 0 of them that I was able to find. So really, this is like a complete standalone of her book. It's also the first book that she's ever written. So obviously like authors get better in time. And this obviously is not her strongest work. And just in general, I really did not enjoy this book. I think I'm going to give it like a 2, maybe a 2.5 stars, because like, I don't necessarily wish I DNF'd it. I'm kind of very happy that I read it so that I know like, what it is, so that I could like say that I've read it. But really, I would never read it again, and I wouldn't particularly recommend it. So I feel like it deserves like a 2.5. So unfortunately, I was in a positive mood when I went into this book. So I was enjoying it for a little bit, but then by the end of it, that really went downhill for multiple reasons. So yeah, that is more or less how I feel about this book. But either way, I am planning to start The Best Thing today. So hopefully this one will go better. But again, it is a second chance romance, so I don't have extremely high hopes for it. But we will see how it goes. I will come back and update you when I have something to share.
A little later.
So I'm currently just over 100 pages into this book, and I wanted to give you a quick update on how it is going. But before I do share with you any details, I do have to give a quick spoiler warning that if you don't really want to hear any details about the story, then maybe don't keep watching, because the back of the book is extremely vague, and it only tells you that like it is some sort of a second chance romance, and that is all I knew about it going into the book, because everybody that I ever saw like review this book is very, very vague about what it's actually about. And I now understand why they're vague, even though I think that it's something that should be very well known about this book. Like, I think if something happens in the first like 50 to 100 pages of a story, it's not technically considered a spoiler. Like, that is technically like the synopsis of like the build-up of the actual story, So in my opinion, this isn't a spoiler, but some people might think it is, so you have been warned. But either way, with that said, in the first 100 pages, we basically meet this girl named Lenny, who is running her family's MMA gym of sorts. And basically 17 months ago, she got, like cut off from her boyfriend of sorts. Like, she was sleeping with this guy, talking, texting with him every day, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, he just stops answering her calls. And for a couple months, she really tries to get a hold of him. Like, she really had to tell him something, so she's like, oh, call me back, leaving him voicemail, sending him text messages, sending him emails, trying to get in touch with like everybody that he knows that like could actually like get a message through to him. And she just never heard back from him, and like she has a very big grudge against him for just like cutting like her off like that. And basically now it's 17 months later, and all like very randomly, this guy just like walks into the gym that her family owns, that she's running, and he's like, look, I really want to explain why I haven't talked to you in all this time, like just give me a minute to like talk to you. She's like, I'm sorry, I really don't want to hear what you have to say. Like, you ignored me and you had your chance and you lost it. And basically, like, they kind of go back and forth for a minute there of like, oh, please talk to me, no, leave me alone sort of situation. And anyway, in the first like 50, 60 pages or so, we basically find out that she actually had a daughter with him, and he had absolutely no clue. Like, she was pregnant when he like decided to cut her off, and basically she was trying to get in touch with him to tell him, and he just never answered her. And that is why, it's like a whole freaking big deal. But basically, he kind kind of like, sees the kid at one point, and he's like, oh my God, whose kid is that? And she's like, it's ours. And he's like, what the hell? Like, I had no clue that I had a kid. And she's like, you didn't see all the messages that I sent you? Like, what the hell? Like, I sent you messages after messages. And he's like, no, I never saw any of them. And he had no clue that he basically had a kid. And then he basically decided that he's going to stick around and like, stay around for his daughter. And that is kind of where I'm at for the story. So I don't know much as to why he like, decides to like never talk to her again for 17 months sort of situation. But basically, yeah, that is more or less the gist of the story. So I had no clue that this was some sort of like accidental pregnancy, second chance. Oh, I had no clue that I had a baby sort of situation. Like, I'm not a really big fan of those books, and I know that some people really are. So I'm surprised that this book isn't like marketed a little bit more for that, because people who are big fans of that type of situation like would totally want to read this book, and they might have no clue that that's what it's actually about. But either way, I don't love these type of stories, but I'm already in it. I had no clue what I was getting myself into, so I am going to keep reading, but I just wanted to give you that update of what this book is actually about before I get any further. So yeah, wow, didn't see that coming, but whatever. Anyway, I'm going to keep reading, and I'll come back and share with you some more thoughts when I have something else to say.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
So I'm not that much further in. I'm only 180 pages in, so not even like halfway through, but I did just find out why he had like stopped talking to her for like, the past 17 months, like why he just like randomly cut her off for no reason. And I wanted to share it with you because I already shared some spoilers, so like why not continue with them? So either way, he finally told her that like the reason why he had cut her off was because he was playing one of his games. Like, I don't think I said this yet, but he's a professional rugby player, and either way, he got very badly injured in a game, and like that's the moment that he ended up cutting her off. And it was basically because like, first of all, he got injured, but then also like he decides to like cut everybody in his life off because he was a really bad like mental state, because he thought he was never going to be able to play again. And like he stopped like looking at his phone, he hasn't checked his messages, he didn't even like go online looking at the media or anything like that, because it was really getting to him, everybody saying how like he might not be able to return to the game and everything like that. So he was just in a really bad mental state, and he was like living in a bubble. And that's not an excuse, and she like totally understood that that's not an excuse, but she also like understood where he was coming from. So either way, it's like she just accepted it for what it was, and she doesn't like fully forgive him, but like, she's like, okay, well, thanks for telling me, now at least I understand. And I'm not really sure how I feel about that. Like, I'm just not into second chance romances, because I never think that there is any sort of excuse, but like it is what it is. And honestly, she is making him like grovel really hard. Like, she is not making it easy for him to get close to her, even though she's like being really like very nice about like him getting close to like her daughter. Like, if he wants to be around for the kid, she's all here for it, but like she wants like basically nothing to do with him. But she's honestly being nicer than like I expected her to be, but also she like is really mad at him still secretly. So either way, that is what we found out, and that's kind of where we're at in the story. But whatever, I'm gonna keep going.
The next day.
So last night I did end up finishing The Best Thing, and no surprise here, but I did not end up loving this book. And what's funny is that I didn't end up enjoying it for reasons that I didn't think were going to be the reasons why this book wasn't going to work for me. But before I get into all the negative things that I wanted to share, I did want to start off with a positive note and tell you what I did enjoy about this book. And that was how hard Jonah had to grovel to win back Lenny's trust and like come back into her life and everything like that. Like, I really enjoyed seeing how she didn't make it easy for him. She didn't like just like let him back into her life, like wait, like, in a half a second of just being like, oh, well, now you're back, so I'm going to take you back. Like, she really made him work for it, and I really appreciated seeing how she didn't give in too easily. And then on his end, I really liked seeing how committed he ended up being, how hard he worked to like win back her trust and everything like that. And what I also really appreciated seeing was that he always kept saying like the perfect things, like exactly what she wanted to hear. But not only did he say the perfect things, but he ended up like, fulfilling those with actual actions. And I really appreciated seeing that, because like, you can say what you want to say, but like it doesn't mean shit until you actually like do what you said you were going to do. And I really liked seeing how he followed through with everything that he said he was going to do. And I really liked the whole groveling aspect of it. Like, that was a positive note for me on this book, but unfortunately that was the only thing that I really did enjoy about this story. And I actually found it to be really, really boring. And I don't mean to say that in like an ultra mean way, but I actually found like the entire book to be really mediocre. Like, it was very like normal everyday things that happened in this book, and I found that to be really boring. All of their interactions, all of the scenes were just like, them putting the baby to bed, or like changing the diaper, or just like feeding her, or stuff like that. I just feel like everything that happened in this book was a little bit too like simple, too everyday. It's like, when you're reading a book, you want to see the more interesting aspects, and instead we saw all of like the boring things that almost could have been like looked over and brushed over and not be the things that were actually mentioned on page, if that makes sense. But either way, yeah, I kind of just in general found it really boring. And then on top of that, I also found found a lot of the side characters to be boring. Like, there was this whole big thing of the fact that like she was raised by her grandfather, and therefore like her and her grandfather were best friends. And I found their relationship, while to be like, it was really cute, like in theory, I found it to be really boring. Like, her best friend was her grandfather, and I don't know, it didn't make for like a more interesting story for me. Like, it made for like, it honestly, it kept boring me, the fact that like her best friend was her grandfather and he was in the story a lot, and like it was cute, but I guess it just wasn't for me. Like, that's just not my type of book. Like, I don't know, I didn't really enjoy that aspect of it. And then on top of that, there were also like a lot of side characters that I thought were like overdeveloped in one way. Like, there was this one thing with this guy from her past that like she had a best friend growing up, and like it was like a whole big deal throughout the story, like here and there, of like there was stuff going on with them as well. And basically I just thought that was like an extra plot line going on that like completely didn't need to be there. And the only positive thing that I saw that it brought to the story was making Jonah jealous a little bit. And while I'm totally here for jealousy, like I love seeing jealousy moments in a book, like just the way that like Noah's character, like this side best friend, ex-best friend character, was developed in the story, I thought was a little bit extra. Like, I didn't think that it needed to be that much there. And then it just bothered me a little bit, just only because like I kept being on a negative streak of keep seeing things that bother me. I happen to have been able to found and pinpoint a lot of things that weren't working for me, and that was definitely one of it. And then on top of that, I don't know what else there was about it. I feel like I had like a handful of things that I was able to think of like when I was reading it, but now I can't really remember it in detail. But it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, I found the book to be a little bit boring. I didn't love all of the side characters. I didn't even love the main character so much. Like, the thing is like Jonah, he was really like cool on page. Like, he always said the right thing. He was technically very swoon-worthy, but I had a zero connection to him. Like, he was definitely not like a book boyfriend of mine that I would ever think about the second I finish this book. Like, I'm never gonna think about him again. And on this, like, also like her, like I didn't really even like care about her too much. She didn't necessarily bother me, but I had no like interesting feelings towards her to like make me like be like interested in the book whatsoever. So it was a very mediocre book for me, like all around the board. I feel like I'm gonna give it like a 3 stars overall, because there were some things that I feel like were solid. Like, I don't think this is like Mariana Zapata's worst book or anything like that, but it definitely was not my favorite of hers. And also, it wasn't a book that was technically for me. Like, this is definitely not a story written for me as a reader. Like, I feel like a lot of people who would really enjoy this book are going to be people who like second chance romances, who like the type of books where it's like there are secret babies, accidental babies, things along those lines. And if you're into groveling, like, you will get a lot of that in this book too. But like, for some reason, there were just a lot of things that I wasn't into the book for. And then on top of that, like, I just didn't connect to it, so therefore I didn't really like it. So whatever, overall, not my favorite book by her, but honestly was not the worst book that I've read by her either. So I feel like that is at least something. But either way, yeah, that is that. I have officially read every single book that Mariana Zapata has ever written. I feel like I have like accomplished something huge, even though this is like so not a big deal. But either way, yeah, that is about it. So let me know what you thought of either of these books, if you've ever read them and you have some interesting thoughts you wanted to share with me. Or let me know what you thought of my reviews on them, because I'd love to hear your thoughts. But either way, with that said, I appreciate you watching this video if you made it to the end, so thank you for that. Also, give this video a like if you enjoyed watching it, and also subscribe if you are not currently subscribed, because I would very much appreciate that as well. But either way, that is about it. So I'm gonna say goodbye. Thank you again for watching, and until next time, enjoy reading.